a moment to look around and note the fire exit nearest to you. In the event of an emergency, please follow the instructions given by staff. Please switch your electronic devices to silent mode now. And if you wish to tweet about tonight's event, the hashtag is PQT. We have 6 topic areas this evening and we'll spend up to 20 minutes on each. This is how it works. For each topic, the chairman will take questions from those of you with your hands up. Please wait for a member of staff with a microphone to reach you before you speak. The chairman will take 3 questions at a time and will then direct your questions to the mayor or an assembly member. We have no advance notice of the questions. If you're able to stand to ask your question, the cameras and those on stage will find it easier to see you. Please do keep your questions short so we can get to as many of you as possible. And please ask questions. With so many of you here tonight, obviously we won't have the time to take everyone's question. So if you don't get to ask yours tonight, please give your question to one of the team in the foyer and we'll answer it later. Please also remember to fill in the feedback form and hand it to a member of staff at the end. We'll finish tonight at 9 p.m. sharp. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, please put your hands together for your chairman this evening, the Assembly Member for South West, Tony Arbour.
Well, they do say that the 2 most boring words in the English language are local and government. But this evening, because you've braved the elements, it's quite clear that in Hounslow and in South West, local government isn't quite as boring as many people would have you believe. This is the first time that People's Question Time has come to Hounslow. It's taken 17 years, and I've no doubt that we will show the mayor what we think of him. That is via your questions, of course. It's, as I say, very good of you that so many of you have turned out. The function of the mayor and the assembly really is to make life in London better for you. This is your opportunity to check with the mayor that he has actually made life in London better for you. And this evening I shall be very glad if many of the questions are actually related to the patch. However, it's not me that you'll be asking the questions of, it will be the mayor and my colleagues from the London Assembly. So would you please welcome the London Assembly members? And now would you welcome the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Right, we will be taking questions on the basis of topics. The first topic we will be taking questions on will be transport, and that will be followed by safety. We've already asked you to keep your questions short so that we can get in as many of you as possible. I will say to you, as I will say to the Mayor and my colleagues, please keep your answers short. We want to get in as many as possible. This is not an occasion for speech makings. I've no doubt you've already switched off your electronic devices, and I would like my colleagues to switch theirs off as well. But it's important that you hear from someone who is completely objective on these matters, and that is the Chair of the London Assembly, Jeanette Arnold.
Well, good evening, everybody, and let me start by thanking you all for coming out on one of the coldest nights that we've had so far. It's lovely to look around and see the population of the area reflected. Welcome all you young people who have come with us tonight, and look forward to hearing your questions. And just to say good evening to the leader, to Mayor, and to wonderful friend Seema. Nice to see you. And all the special guests here tonight. You've got such a special assembly member that can I ask you to put your hands together one more time for him? Thank you, thank you. Thank you. And I just wanted to use the next 5 minutes just to say to you a few things about the work that we're doing. We all know that last year was a very difficult year for London. And at the Assembly, we have ensured that the issues such as the Grenfell Tower fire, the terror attacks, and big policy issues such as Brexit have featured strongly in our work. Grenfell Tower fire, we kept a close watch on developments, and a number of committees, including the Greater London Assembly Oversight Committee, the Planning Committee, and the Housing Committee, have examined the issues leading up to the fire, the response to it, and the likely repercussions. And as we develop these recommendations, what we then do is we actually then send them to the appropriate department, individual. Most of our recommendations, you might imagine, are targeted at the mayor. We're always looking for him to do more, to do better, to go higher, and to do all that he can to make life for Londoners just that bit better. Can't speak, can you, as a politician nowadays without mentioning Brexit? So the Assembly has kept up the pressure on the mayor to ensure that he is representing the issues that matter to London in his conversations with David Davis, one of the government's lead negotiators. And we have published a series of Brexit directive letters which have been well received. And what that was about was to ensure that we were picking up the voices from Londoners. We had open meetings with EU citizens, we've spoken to business, we've spoken to people from the healthcare workers, and a recent letter was published by our Police and Crime Committee, and it urged the mayor to press for greater clarity on the government's ambitions for law enforcement and justice following Brexit. So many areas that will impact on our lives. So that's what we've been trying to pick up, those areas that we don't hear a lot about. As we know, London has been subject to a range of burst water mains over the last year. And so our Environment Committee has been very active and has really put the pressure on Thames Water and others, changing the way they work. And recently, when they came back to us, they were able to tell us from the work that we'd done with them in 2016, their response to a recent water mains burst was within 15 minutes they'd responded rather than overnight, as they usually do, and that they were much more aware of what they needed to do, and most important of all, everybody was talking together, whereas clearly in the past they weren't. Just to mention, you can't speak again without transport, and members of our Transport Committee have produced some incredible reports looking at the system as it is now, but as importantly, looking towards the future. Yesterday, the Economy Committee published its report on the Nighttime Committee, and I've just read it, and it's such a really good document, because, you know, we forget that in our 24-hour city, there are people who are not paid, if you like, the day rate, who have very little protection in their jobs, and the services are not there for them. It's a really good report, which we will be exploring shortly at our plenary meeting. I just bring you up to date and say this afternoon we not only put pressure on the current mayor, we also hold previous mayors to account. And so members of our Oversight Committee, I won't say they were blessed with his company, because I don't know that they thought it was a blessing, but they quite rightly summoned the former mayor to come in front of them to give further explanations about the millions that was lost on his folly projects. And I know that many people have followed that on Twitter, but it's not a Twitter issue, it's a real concern to Londoners. And what we're saying by this action is we will keep up the pressure on any mayor, and we will ask the questions that matter to London. So let me just finish by saying, in the year of the 100th anniversary of some women getting the vote, the whole Assembly celebrated this amazing achievement with a unanimous motion celebrating the achievement of the women who fought passionately, gave their lives, endured hardship and cruelty at the hands of the state to make it happen for us to be able to go out and put that X against our choice for our political leaders. Let's never forget their sacrifice that they made for us. So we will keep up the work on your behalf, and as you've been told earlier, if there are any questions that you don't get asked tonight, send them to your constituency member, that's Tony Arbour, all of them. So, but do send them to whichever assembly member you like, and we will ensure that they're answered. But enjoy tonight, and I look forward to hearing your questions and indeed the answers from the Mayor. Thank you very much.
I'll now ask the Mayor, Sadiq Khan, to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming to Hounslow Civic Centre on this bitterly cold evening. It's great to be in the People's Republic of Hounslow tonight. Before I start, can I also thank Assemblymember Tony Arbour, not only for welcoming us here tonight and the job he's doing representing you on the Assembly, but for his work as a councillor since he was first elected in Richmond upon Thames in 1971. I was literally in nappies when Tony was first elected. Remarkably, since People's Question Time first began in 2000, Tony has never missed a single People's Question Time. Let's give Tony a round of applause, please. Can I also thank Councillor Steve Curran, the leader of Hounslow Council, the Mayor of Hounslow, she's the one with the bling, and all the other councillors for their hospitality. And also it's good to see the local Member of Parliament, Seema Malhotra, the MP for Feltham and Heston, who's here tonight as well. My ambition is the same today as when I first became the Mayor. For every Londoner to get the opportunities to get on in life that our city gave to me and my family. This means working to ensure that our city works for all Londoners and making sure things like investment, transport links, access to culture and opportunities to get on in life are spread across every corner of our city, outer London as well as inner London, zones 4 and 5 as well as zones 1 and 2. And I'm working to improve the lives of every Londoner in every borough of our incredible city, including this great borough of Hounslow. I don't have time in my opening remarks to mention all the key initiatives I am working on, so I'm going to touch on just 2 key issues. Firstly, policing. I'm working hard every day to keep our city safe. We've already delivered some major reforms to help tackle crime. This includes restoring real neighbourhood policing here in Hounslow and across our city. Every ward now has at least 2 named officers and 1 community support officer, and also investing much more in youth services to help divert young people in London away from crime. But we still face a massive challenge. Following the deep and sustained cuts over the last 8 years by the government to police forces and preventative services, crime is rising across our country, particularly violent crime and particularly burglaries. I'm not willing to stand by when it's the safety of Londoners being put at risk. So I recently took the decision to allocate the Met Police an extra £110 million collected from business rates that would usually be spent elsewhere to make sure we can fund an additional 1,000 police officers. But I've got to be upfront with you. This alone will not reverse the rise in crime we're seeing in London and across the country. It will just enable us to keep our heads above the water. The Met Police will still be severely stretched, but I can assure you that I'll keep putting on pressure to the government to deliver more investment in our police forces and restore funding to the services that provide alternative paths for our young people away from crime. The second issue is housing. The housing crisis is not only contributing to the shocking cost of living in our city, but it's a massive social issue too, causing poverty, health problems, and growing inequality. I've been honest from the start. I can't promise to turn things around overnight, and ultimately we need more investment from the government to fix this problem that's been decades in the making. But I'm pleased to report that we're starting to make some progress in the right direction. We've increased the number of genuinely affordable homes in the planning system from 13%, before I became mayor, to 38% of applications now. We've agreed investment in 50,000 new genuinely affordable homes, including new homes based on social rent levels, council homes. We're helping build and we're helping fund projects with the council, like the housing zone site here at the Civic Centre, where work is underway to build more than 900 homes. Half of them will be affordable. And we're using all the powers at our disposal to improve the experience of renters in London and to crack down on rogue landlords and foreign buyers using London homes as gold bricks. We've got a long way to go, and this is only the beginning. I hope this gives you an idea of how we're tackling these two key issues for our city. I look forward to answering some of your questions in these two areas later on this evening. And there are other areas, from tackling air pollution to supporting culture and encouraging greater social integration. Let me just finish with this. There's much more to do. We have made a good start, and I'm determined to keep up the pace of change. You have a bright future here in Hounslow with many talented, ambitious Londoners. It's crucial that we tap into this potential and make sure everyone has the chance to reach their potential. Thank you very much, and I look forward to answering your questions this evening.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I shall be taking questions in groups of 3. The first topic for the next 18 minutes is transport. And you can address your question either to the Mayor or to relevant Assembly members. And we have this evening, we have the Chairman of the Transport Committee, and we have representatives from all of the parties. Right, first question, please. Lady with the white hair here. Do forgive me if I can't distinguish you properly. The lighting isn't terribly good. Another question, number 5. Can you come to the gentleman with the cheese cutter hat? And over there, lady in the yellow thing. Yellow top. Wave. I think the man with the paddle can't see you. Okay. Right, madam.
Thank you very much. My name's Rula Konzotis. I'm a resident of this borough. Setting aside for a moment where budgets are held, how can it be right for TfL to spend nearly £70 million on CS9 when it has suffered nearly £1 billion in losses? And how can you, as Mayor, Mr. Khan, with so many more challenges being faced today, as you've just mentioned, in housing, health and social care, to name just but 3 areas, justify this outlay on a cycle superhighway at such a time?
Thank you very much. And now the gentleman with the hat.
Hello, my name is Matt Smith, a resident of Chiswick High Road and actively involved in social media debate about cycle infrastructure. I understand your transport strategy is ready for consideration in March. It's an excellent strategy. In Chiswick, we highly approve of putting pedestrians and cyclists first. It says that walking will be prioritised across London streets, and they will be more appealing with wider, clutter-free pavements. CS9 reduces the width of pavement for about 91% of its route along Chiswick High Road. Some of this is minimal, but in numerous stretches, including outside my own home and my business premises, as well as multiple other stretches like the Roman Catholic Church, the pavement will be reduced by 2/3 of its width. As this flies in the face of your excellent healthy street strategy, what will you do, Mayor, to stop TfL from taking away vast sections of our space for walking?
Thank you very much. And now the lady in the yellow.
My name is Samantha Medici. I was just wondering, what plans do you have to improve accessibility at underground stations, particularly those in Zone 1 and 2?
Right. Mr. Mayor.
Well, let me deal with the first two questions are linked, although asked in a different way. And I'll deal with both of them together. Firstly, I do not apologise for wanting to have more people walking and cycling. And I'm sorry if you're against that. What I'm in favour of, at a time when our population is growing, is to encourage more people to walk and cycle. And the second gentleman with the Peaky Blinders cap was right, to say our ambition should be to encourage more people to walk and cycle. And we've got to think about how we design our city so more people can walk and cycle. What I've done, again, I'm not apologising for this, is invest in more now in walking and cycling than any previous mayor in the history of our city, and I'm proud of that. It's in the context of each year, more than 9,000 Londoners dying prematurely because of the poor quality air in our city. It's in the context of children having lungs that are underdeveloped because of the bad quality air in our city. And it's the context of the population of our city growing from 8.8 million now to, roughly speaking, 9 million in 2020 and 10 million in 2030. So unless we find more ways to move people around in an environmentally friendly manner, that's less destructive, we're going to have problems. And that's why we're consulting, as you suggested, in relation to getting more people to cycle. The first drafts of consultation are never perfect. That's why you consult. And I've been really impressed by the numbers of people who've responded to the consultation, saying, look, we're in favour of the principle, but you've got these details wrong, as the gentleman said. Particularly, it can't be right in the southern part of Chiswick High Street, for example, to have less pavement space, particularly when we want people sitting outside enjoying the weather, enjoying some of the cafes that you benefit from in Chiswick High Street. So what the Walking and Cycling Commissioner is doing, Dr. Will Norman, who's here today, not simply visiting Father Dunn and the church, speaking to residents and shopkeepers, reading the responses to the consultation, more than 60% in favour of CS9, but making sure we improve the consultation phase. So watch this space. And I can promise you we will take on board some of your concerns, but I'm not going to apologise for wanting to have more people cycle and more people walk. It's really important that we do so. In relation to the question asked by Samantha, in relation to step-free access, look, public transport should be what it says on the tin, which is transport for the public. And not all members of the public are able-bodied. Some of them have access issues and have disabilities. Some older people have issues in relation to getting around. Some mums and dads with buggies have issues getting around. Roughly speaking, there are 270 underground stations across our city. About 20% are accessible to everyone. That can't be right. So I've funded the biggest increase in step-free access that the underground's ever seen. Osterley, which is in this area, will be step-free. The building works begin 2018. It should be step-free by 2019. Boston Manor will be step-free shortly thereafter. But you're right, the focus has to be in the busy stations. You mentioned Zone 1 and Zone 2. A number of stations in Zone 1 will be step-free very soon. Victoria has had work done. Every single one of the Elizabeth Line 40 stations will be step-free. All our buses are accessible to those who are disabled. 91% of our bus stops are accessible to those who are disabled. And one of the things that Will is doing as the Walking and Cycling Commissioner is taking on board the concerns disabled people have around cycling. The previous mayor had a cycling commissioner, and that's all he did. But we've got to, as the gentleman said, you've got to have walking and cycling. You can't have them versus us. And that's why Will's job is walking and cycling, thinking about how we design things, but also thinking about supporting small businesses. Because what we don't want to do is inadvertently, for the best of interest, damage a small business like yours. So please stay at the end. Will is here. Please feel free to speak to Will. Will, do you want to stand up so as people know? Will is the good-looking man with glasses. So we're going to stay behind. Any particular issues, please raise them with us, because we want to get this right. We want you to be in favour of the improvement in walking and cycling.
Thank you very much. I've told the Mayor previously that this particular matter of CS9 has exercised the people of Chiswick more than anything else in the past 18 years. Quite extraordinary the amount of controversy it has caused. Second lot of 3 questions, please. Is there anybody over there in the sort of far corner beyond paddle? Do you know, I can't even see the paddle behind, sort of right over there, right at the end behind paddle 2, right at the end. That's the one.
Hello there. I'd just like to question the cycling issue again. You may have noticed all the cars that are parked in front gardens in the suburbs. What I'm interested in is how cycling can be made a viable option along the lines of the what they call Santander bikes now. So we got these bikes outside, which you probably tripped over on the way in, the orange and black ones. How can we incorporate that into the public transport system?
Thank you. Can we have somebody in the middle block over here? There's a man also wearing a funny hat. It looks as though it's yellow and he's got a beard, I think.
Yes? Okay. Is this one? My question is on transport. My wife here, who is not well and is a bit fragile, and there's lots of elderly people I see on buses. It's become very apparent to me since I've been in this position myself, traveling around with my wife. Some of the drivers of buses, they're not so aware, shall we say, about elderly and frail people when they get on buses, particularly during the day. And sometimes they brake too hard or they accelerate away too much, and the journey is often fraught with that kind of experience, and you become almost nauseous by the end of it. So I think that should be more awareness with these drivers to make them aware of this. Particularly, there's a lot of elderly people out there. Also, when they come close to the bus stop, sometimes they're a foot and a half away from the pavement, and like my wife here, she's trying to stretch and get over, and she's almost falling over. And even in a couple of instances, because she's a bit slow to get out, she's been trapped in the door. So I think this is a very important area to highlight and understand. And as you know, there's more and more people like this trying to get around in the system, and this is a really serious issue, I believe.
Okay,
yeah?
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody over here. There, it looks like somebody with white hair and sitting at the end. You're right next to number 8. Yes.
I'd like to ask the Mayor what he's going to do about the spiralling crime on our public transport system. And please don't give me any figures, Mr. Mayor, because I know for a fact that TfL are stopping their staff from reporting actual incidents to try and minimise the problem. I have close friends and family who work on the system, the buses and the tubes and the trains, and since the closure of ticket offices and the nighttime tube, and the absence of platform staff, the situation is spiralling out of control. So I'd like the Mayor to try and investigate it, perhaps set up his own team, bypassing TfL to get the real figures and deal with the problem.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, the first question, the first question asked by the gentleman at the back in relation to changing the culture in relation to cycling, a really big question you asked, and you're right. We've got to think about how we live in our city, where people live, where people work, where people study, where people play. And you mentioned some of the dockless cycle hire schemes taking place. One of the things we're going to avoid happening is a free-for-all, where these companies come in and they start leaving their bikes willy-nilly without due regards to space, without due regards to the consequences of bikes being left, or without due regards to residents like you and others who have cars and they want to come out of their driveway. So what we're doing is we are coordinating with the councils. There are 33 councils in London, so that the councils reach an agreement with these private companies before they have permission to have these dockless bikes. The advantage of the Santander scheme was we could work with them and the councils to have some coordination around where those cycle hire schemes work. And so we need to get some coordination around these dockless bikes because you're right. If we're not careful, it can lead to all sorts of problems. We've had examples of bikes just being dumped or them clogging up pavements so people who are disabled can't get past. And we're making progress there. But the fundamental thing, though, is what I've set out in my draft London plan. We've got to think about how a city develops. In answer to a question from the gentleman about CS9, I made the point about the population of our city is growing. That means not only do we have to think about building more affordable homes, thinking about where people are going to get jobs and work to pay for living in London, but also how we get about our city, which means thinking about designing into developments places to lock up your bike, designing into shopping centres, new town halls, places to lock up your bikes. It's really important we think about that going forward. And if you get a chance, do look up the draft London plan on the website and see some of the plans we have there in relation to what the expectations are going forward. Because you're right, we can't inadvertently, in a wish to encourage more people to cycle, leads to chaos and sort of cluttering up of the pavement and of town centres. The second question is a really important question, and actually in my answer, I'm going to give you an example of how the Assembly works so incredibly well. The London Assembly did a report called Driven to Distraction. I look towards Caroline because she's raised this with me at Mayor's Question Time. And so this is an example of the Assembly looking at bus drivers, and at the same time, the Trade Union Unite did a report as well. And what they discovered was, for a variety of reasons, there's a disincentive for companies to be training bus drivers. There are pressures on bus drivers to get from A to B, which means, you're right, sometimes passengers like your wife get let down. And I've taken on board as the Mayor some of the recommendations made by the Assembly. And what I've done is try to raise standards. So, for example, for the first time ever, we have a licence for London. So we are saying to all privatised companies, if you're a bus driver in Company 1 and you leave and join Company 2, what happened in the past was the bus company would reduce your wages. They won't reward you for experience. And experienced drivers have been lost from our city. We're now providing a carrot to these privatised companies to keep experienced bus drivers who will make sure they provide a good service to your wife and others. And we've got to make sure we carry on improving the standards. That's why people sort of say to me, why are you investing money in loos for bus drivers, in toilets for bus drivers? The answer is, unless they've got toilets, they're rushing to get from A to B because they're not been to the loo for 3 hours. And so we've got to invest in our public service, and that includes bus drivers. And you've given just a couple of examples of the consequences of corners being cut. I want to turn it around and say, actually, one of the advantages of having better training for bus drivers, of giving bus drivers dignity, it will improve the quality of life for a bus driver, but also the experience passengers receive, like your wife. I'm not sure if many people know this, but bus drivers are quite close to me. I'm not sure if you know what my dad did. Anyway, but watch this space and watch the improvements we're making in relation to this area. But thank you for raising this issue. It's really important. And we've noticed that quite a lot. We've also piloted announcements on buses as the bus moves on to make sure people just hold on tight, because you're right, it is a big issue. The question from the back, Tony, raised in relation to crime on public transport. I partially agree with you, but with respect, sir, I think I disagree with part of what you said. Let me see what I mean by that. We, the taxpayer, are spending lots of London taxpayers' money in policing, and we fare payers are spending lots of money by Transport for London paying for additional British Transport Police and additional police in our public transport system. So it's not fair to say we're not investing in relation to safety on public transport, buses, underground, trams, London Overground, and Network Rail as well. Where you're right to remind me, and I agree with you, is to remind me of the consequences of some of the ticket offices closing down and of there being less human beings on platforms. And that's why one of the first things I did when I became mayor is ask an independent body, Travel Watch, to do a review saying, look, the previous mayor closed down the ticket offices, got rid of lots of staff. What's your expert advice in relation to what we need on the underground? And they said, I'm paraphrasing, we need, roughly speaking, 300 staff. I've agreed to that, and we've got more than 300 additional staff who've joined since I became mayor on the underground. Roughly speaking, I think it's 800 additional staff on the underground system. For the reasons you've said, it makes people feel safer, it deters crime. And the final thing I'll say is this, Tony. One of the things that we've done is to actually encourage people to report crime more on the underground, more on public transport. One of the big issues we've had is an underreporting of crime, particularly women and girls. Women and girls suffer horrible physical abuse, sexual abuse on our public transport system. And the phrase, the advertising is, report it to stop it. And that's encouraged more and more people to report harassment and abuse on public transport. So I think it is unfair to suggest we're trying to massage the figures to keep them down. I want people to have confidence in the public transport system and to report if they're the victims of crime or witness any crime in the public transport system.
Okay. Thank you very much. And to wind up this section, Assembly Member Pigeon.
Thank you very much. I'm Caroline Pigeon. I'm Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee, and I just want to respond to a few of the transport issues we've had. In terms of cycling, as a Transport Committee, we're very supportive of the cycling programmes, but what we're concerned about is if we want to get more people cycling in outer London, we've got to start seeing some investment in there. Too often it's felt that some of the investment has just been in central London. And I think the dockless bikes are a very good example, as long as they don't clutter the pavements, but actually we've got to start building in parking, and that means at stations to make it easier for people to get around and connect to the trains and network. It means storage on streets, and that might sometimes mean taking away a car parking space, but you can fit 8 or 10 bikes in that. We need to look at some of those decisions going forward. But one of the things I'm concerned about is if more and more people want to cycle, actually sometimes you need a bit of refresher training. I know there's some excellent training that goes on out in the boroughs, but I think we need to be pushing that more to link into new infrastructure that's going in to make sure people have the confidence to go out and use that infrastructure. One area we are concerned about is the Mayor's got a very bold target, but we want to see some interim targets going up to 2041 to really make sure that we're getting as many people cycling as possible. The issue of buses that came up and bus drivers, as the Mayor said, we did a huge piece of work on that last year. And actually one of the things at the heart of this is how the contracts are set up with the bus companies at the moment means there's an incentive for them to keep to their timetable. There are no safety incentives in that. And that was one of our clear recommendations. And I know the Mayor's now agreed to an independent review of some of these issues that we raised. And I really hope we start to see safety at the core of some of those contracts rather than just getting the bus there on time, because people will take risks if that's what they're being measured against. Crime on public transport has been addressed. I think one of the key issues for me is making sure stations in London are fully staffed from first to last train. And that means where we have metro line services, we have South West Railways out this way, we have Southern where I live and South Eastern. We want to make sure actually that Transport for London run those metro services, because then we're guaranteed to have fully staffed stations from first to last train. And we've seen the huge success of that with the London Overground. And finally, I just wanted to touch on the accessibility point that was raised in the last one. Yes, step-free access is really important for all the reasons given, but actually if we want our transport network to be fully accessible, that means making sure we have things like more audio announcements to help people around. We need to improve the signage for people with hearing problems. We need to pick up things like real-time information when a lift is out of order, so that somebody who has got a mobility issue knows they don't get off at that station or finds an alternative route. And some of these issues are really picked up by Transport for All, a very good disability campaigning charity in London. And I certainly went to a meeting recently, and some very small changes they suggested would make a big difference to everyone who lives with a different disability in London.
Okay, thank you very much. I know there were many other people who wanted to ask questions on transport. At the end of the meeting in the foyer, there will be people who will take your questions and ensure that you actually get an answer. Okay, we now go on to the next topic, which is on safety, and that does include policing and the fire brigade. And once again, I will take questions in threes. I'll take questions in the far block beyond 7. There aren't any. I'll take this gentleman here who has a tattoo on his arm. That's it in row 6, where 6 is.
Hello. Okay. Hi. I'm not a my name is Tan, and I'm not a resident. I'm from Malaysia actually, and I heard Sadiq talk a lot about international politics, and I think this is very relevant to safety, not just for London but also for the whole world. So I'm not sure you heard about Ahok, who is your counterpart in Indonesia. No,
honestly, we want questions
it's
which are
it's
related
relevant.
to
It's
the
related
safety of
to
Londoners.
terror attack and the crime rate. Yeah. So this is relevant. This is the root cause of the problem we're facing today in the whole world. Yeah. Ahok, a governor with a minority ethnicity, was thrown into jail for insulting Quran. Yeah, in a Muslim country, and you did not speak up about that, and then you instead you made a statement about terrorism attack is part and parcel of living in a big city.
Sorry,
That's
sorry.
a big problem.
No, I'm sorry.
This is the root cause of the
I'm
crime.
not accepting this question.
And there was this.
That will do. Would
Muslim were raping.
Take his microphone from him. Take his microphone. Thank you so much. Sit down. Sit down, or you will have to leave. You will have to go. Would you escort that gentleman from the hall, please? Right. A question from the block over there. Question from the block over there. There's a young man with a tie. Unusually, a young man with a tie. Yes, you. That's the one.
Recently there has been a rapid increase on knife violence in London. Although conservative austerity is a factor, how can you make sure that when you receive those additional fundings, it is going towards effective crime policies that are helping the youth?
Did you get that, Mr. Mayor?
Shall I repeat it?
No. We got that one. Of course, this was an example. Hounslow is tolerant and open to absolutely everybody, including the man with a beard. Including the man with a beard standing up there with glasses next to a man with a very long beard.
Sorry. Hi, good evening. My name is Shafiq, local resident. Mr. Mayor, your decision to change the policing model from 32, which is the current Met's borough model, to 12, which will be the new basic command unit model, means in some cases up to 3 boroughs policing arrangements will become 1, as in the case of Merton, Richmond, and Wandsworth, and a few others. Bearing in mind that every borough has its own policing needs, are you not making it as if one size fits all and therefore compromising on the policing requirements of certain boroughs? Thank you.
Okay, and we will take a genuine third question from gentleman in the second row here. That's the one. Yep.
Hi there. My name is Mohammed Ali, and I'm a Hounslow citizen and a student at KCL. My question is regards to the knife crime as well. The question is, why hasn't the knife crime issue been approached in a more holistic way, such as a public health intervention, as this is more efficient? I think it's more efficient than the current enforcement methods. I also think that the enforcement methods is not doing enough, as those involved are from disadvantaged backgrounds, and the sentences will not deter them from doing the crime, as it's a cycle. And tackling knife crime in this way has already left a positive impact in Scotland. So why hasn't it been introduced in London?
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Mayor.
So let me deal with the first question and the third question together, because obviously they're linked around knife crime. Let me begin by just saying that last week, 2 more Londoners were killed as a consequence of knife crime. Sadiq Mohammed and Abdi Karim Hassan, 17 years old and 20-year-old in Camden. This year, 16 Londoners have lost their lives as a consequence of knives. Knife crime is going up across London. It's going up across the country. And I think the gentleman, Mohammed Ali, is absolutely right. We aren't going to solve the issue of knife crime just by enforcement. It's got to be a holistic approach. What does that mean? It means we've got to be tough on knife crime. We do have to invest in the police. We do have to give them the resources they need and the support they need, and I'll come on to that in a second. But also we've got to be tough on the causes. We've got to invest in young people. You can't say there's not a link between youth centres closing down. I'm not excusing criminality, by the way. Youth centres closing down, cuts in education provisions, children's services losing their services, the cuts you've seen over the last few years, and young people therefore having fewer constructive things to do, and young people somehow thinking it's cool or gives them respect to carry a knife. So we've got to invest in young people, and that's why in the budget I announced last week, we announced £45 million for young people. Sian Berry, who's another member of the Assembly who sits over there, did a report last year. And what Sian's, Sian will talk herself, but what Sian's report showed was over the last 8 years, the number of youth centres closed down across London, the number of youth places lost, which means young people not going to youth centre, but hanging around street corners and doing things that aren't sensible. So what I've invested also is in mental health facilities, because obviously young people sometimes need support, particularly if they've been the victims of crime. And last week, in a visit that had been arranged for a while, the Commissioner of the Police and the Deputy Mayor for Policing and Crime went to Scotland to speak to the Violence Reduction Unit. And actually, we work closely with them and many others as well. So we are invested in young people. We're invested in policing. But what I'd say to you is this, both of you. This issue won't be solved by parents by themselves. They have a role to play. Big brothers, big sisters have a role to play. Uncles, aunties, faith leaders, teachers, the media, politicians, the police, all of us have a role to play to make sure young people don't think it's somehow cool or okay to leave home with a knife. And we've got to turn this around because there are too many bereaved families in London. The second question in the middle, Tony, was in relation to Shafiq's question about the basic command units. And let me just explain to you the rationale behind the basic command units. And it's very simple. The previous structure of 32 boroughs was designed for a Met Police service of 32,000 officers. And that system works when there are 32,000 police officers. We have lost over the last 8 years 40% of our budget in London with the police service. That's meant that 2/3 of community support officers have lost their jobs. That's meant that's about 4,000 CSOs gone. That's meant 1/3 of police staff losing their jobs, about 3,000 gone. That means, roughly speaking, 110 police stations and front counters closing down. That means 100 police buildings being sold off. So that old model simply doesn't work for 30,000 officers with fewer police staff, fewer community support officers. And so what we've moved towards is a basic command unit where we can have people working closer together, the detectives working closer together. It improves things like safeguarding. It means we can restore neighbourhood policing, but it is challenging. I'm not going to lie to you. It's challenging for the reasons you've alluded to. There are few people, fewer boroughs, 32. Each borough would have one borough commander. Now 12 basic command units. And that's why I'm investing £110 million in the police service this year. But it's a tip in the ocean in relation to the cuts made over the last 7-8 years.
Okay. Assembly Member O'Connell.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Steve O'Connell. I represent Croydon and Sutton on the London Assembly, and I chair the Assembly Police and Crime Committee, and delighted to be here tonight. So picking up first of all on the questions around knife violence, that to me and to many others is the #1 issue in London today. As we've heard, we are losing far too many of our young people, and there are far too many young people prepared to leave home with a knife, be it a knife they just take out of the kitchen sink, and prepared to settle their differences in ways of extreme violence. And this is unprecedented, and it needs to be addressed, and I agree completely with the sentiments already that it is a complex problem. We cannot arrest ourselves out of this issue, although, of course, we must use all the force of the law against those who are prepared to and do commit acts of violence. There is the need of a holistic approach. In Croydon, we are unfortunately, one of the highest boroughs with knife crime. we are losing also too many of our young people. So we do need proper use of stop and search, and I think my colleague Sean is going to comment on that. We need that used properly and sensitively, and I think that's entirely appropriate. But as the Mayor says, there are reasons that young people are going out and doing violence at a very increasingly young age, and that is of the concern that we have. Those of 18, 19 and 20 are sadly probably lost to the system and need to be arrested and probably incarcerated. But the fact of the matter is that there are 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds prepared to do so. So it's an issue, and that is the policy, I think, of the committee. Moving to the borough mergers, I think this wonderful borough is going to be merged with Ealing and Hillingdon. I'm sure you will all have opinions around that. There are reasons for the mergers, not just around the resource issue that the Mayor has talked about. I think it's been an aspiration of the Met Police for some time to have a more strategic way of delivering their business. I think it is a necessity, but it is a high-risk necessity. And there's been all sorts of issues that have been highlighted by the committee around... We're going
to find it difficult to get through all the
around consultation. So I think on borough mergers, we need to look at it very closely, and I'll be interested if people from Hounslow do write to our committee with their views around that.
Okay, thank you very much. Assembly Member Berry.
Thank you. I'll be as quick as I can. Yes, the Mayor, to his credit, has listened to Assembly members over the past year. When we were both standing for Mayor, young people already did see this coming. There was a petition signed by 40,000 young people asking for reinvestment in youth services. They were really worried to see youth centres closing around them, and they asked us all to make a pledge to do something about that. One of the first things I did when I was elected after that was get the numbers, and that's the report that the Mayor referred to. I asked all the councils, what have you cut out of youth services? And the number we got back was horrific. It was over £30 million since 2011 taken out of services for young people. And even the police were saying you can't keep pulling money out of public services and not expect to see consequences. So with the money that the Mayor had from the business rates this year, he has put 45 million back in. That's about 1/3 of what's not been spent since 2011, but I think it'll make an absolutely huge difference. And you're right, the public health approach, Mohammed, I can't see you anymore, is the correct one. It is what Scotland has done, and it looks at things holistically. It builds up a strong society. It recognises that violence is something that will spread, that you need to be treating the causes, not just the symptoms. And it is a different approach than what's currently in the Mayor's knife crime strategy. But again, the Deputy Mayor for Crime and Policing and Crime and the Mayor are listening really hard to people putting this forwards now, and I think we're seeing some improvements. So yeah, credit to the Mayor for listening. We had the former Mayor in today in the Oversight Committee, and he kind of waved his hands around and said, what can you see that the Mayor has done? And I think the really important thing is this is not something you can see. This is, youth centres all across the city, youth services, youth workers with jobs again. Those aren't things that are visible, that have your name on it, Sadiq. Those are things that genuinely make a difference. So, well done. Thank you.
Assembly Member Bailey.
Hi, I'm Assembly Member Bailey. I'm a Conservative London-wide member. Credit where credit due. The Mayor did say he would try to do something about this, and he has. He's definitely looked at it. His knife crime strategy, though, can do a few things a bit better, in my opinion. Sean and I have a slight disagreement about where we put this new money for communities. I've been a youth worker for 26 years. Given a chance, I would ask the Mayor to do something new. I think he needs to look at mental health more pointedly than youth work. If I had to pick one, I'd pick mental health. But on top of that, I would pick family support in all the different ways it can happen. Very few children behave for their youth worker. They absolutely will behave for their parents and their wider family if that context around family support is built properly. Also, family support has many, many more positive aspects into the future. I do accept the Mayor is correct. We can't arrest our way out of this. That's not going to happen. But the Mayor does control the police and can do a lot more about how they interact with everyone, particularly young people, particularly people from vulnerable communities. The Mayor should actually be looking at how the police are trained He should be doing something about how they're trained and how they try to build up the interaction with his new way that he's setting out how policing is laid out in London. So where I do support the mayor is that he has looked at it, there's no doubt in it, but I do think he should have a slightly different emphasis because we would get a long-term gain in many areas, not just violent crime, but also educational outcomes and the rest of it as well. And the key thing for us all, and it is for us all, is a cultural approach. Our children, and by children I mean young people, our young people, let me rephrase it, are far too willing to partake in very, very serious levels of violence. Acid attacks, moped attacks, knife, that is a cultural effect. The mayor cannot deal with that on his own. We all need to help. Thank you.
Take 3 more quick questions on this. Anybody at the back there? The middle? No? Let's have the guy that... it may be a lady. Second row in, opposite number 7.
I would just like to say that I know that there's been awful children killed in all these knife crimes, but also that it affects ordinary people. I've had personal experience in my own home. I can't discuss it because of children, where we were lucky. My husband was stabbed, but he survived. You know, Chiswick isn't just about the cycle superhighway or whatever. You know, the health of young people, the mental health, which was involved in this case, is absolutely important. And children that are coming out of care need support in the community. It's absolutely vital. We live with it every day. As a mum, I've had to be strong for my family, my children. It isn't just about gang culture. There's a lot more to it than that. And I support what is being done, and I thank the police and the emergency services for what they did for our family. Thank you
very much. There's a man wearing, again, looks like a Peaky Blinders hat, right at the back there, near number 3.
Hello, Mayor Sadiq. My name is Ali Ahmed. I go to the College of Law in Bloomsbury at Tottenham Court Road. And there's never been a day where I've seen people on the streets sleeping throughout the night. There hasn't been a day where I've seen many people just off the strip of Tottenham Court Road station sleeping, looking, you know, flabbergasted. And it shocks me, saddens me, and I genuinely feel horrified to see people on the street like that. Today, it was snowing, and I saw people on mattresses covered in snow, noses pale. They were, you know, they couldn't stand. So what is the mayor doing about not only homeless people, but homeless people within the cities and within people who are living in different areas of London? I understand today on social media there was a viral message that went out, especially due to the weather, where there's been sort of local authorities intervening in the situation and helping.
I'm sure the mayor will tell you what he's doing on that. Is there another question right at the back? Well, it looks like a lady with a white blouse, about near number 1. Near paddle number 1, no, in the other direction. Lady with a white blouse. That's the one with her hand high in the air.
My name is Katrina Cheek and I'm the Member of Youth Parliament for Hounslow. You've promised £45 million to youth services in London over the next few years, Mr. Mayor. Yet none of this is going to local authorities, despite the huge cuts they've had to make due to austerity. Why is that?
Okay, right. Okay.
So, Christina, good question. Thank you for your question. It is. They can bid for it. So it's £45 million. It's 15 million over the next 3 years, and councils can bid for it. Youth centres can bid for it. If you want to set up a youth venture, you can bid for it. So nobody's excluded from bidding for it. Schools can bid for it if they want to provide more after schools clubs and stuff as well. The stuff that Sian and Sean were talking about is being innovative. trying new things, and that's what we're doing. So they can bid for it if they want to bid for providing facilities for young people. But just to remind ourselves, the report that Sian did and the work she's done, even though we're investing this money, it's new money, it won't meet the money we've lost over the last few years, but it's still better than nothing. The question, can I just deal with the issue raised by the lady, the very brave lady in blue in relation to being the victim of violent crime? Just to give you an idea of the scale of the challenge facing our police, 40% of the issues the police face every day in London have a mental health element in it. For a variety of reasons, because of cuts made over various years, care in the community is not really working. 300 calls a day are from somebody with mental health issues. And that's one of the reasons why we're investing this year and every year going onwards in a sum of money, £3.3 million, so that the police can make sure there are mental health experts to deal with people who are unwell, to get them freed up to do proper policing with criminals and stuff. It is a big issue. Joanne McCartney, my deputy mayor, just reminded me that we're also training teachers to spot and identify mental health issues so they can, in the classroom, help here. And we're also doing some work with CAMS to make sure we can offer better facilities for young people across London. I just want to remind all of us, in London today, there are one out of three of us has a mental health issue. Just look around this room. And so we've got to make sure we reach out and help those who have mental health issues to make sure it doesn't spiral into criminality with the consequences that you alluded to. Ali, thank you for your question in relation to rough sleeping. We are probably the 5th richest city in the world. That just underscores the shame in relation to the issue of rough sleeping in London. There are, roughly speaking, 8,000 rough sleepers in our city, Ali. 8,000. It doubled from 2008 up until now. What we've done this year, even before the cold weather, is to change the rules in relation to shelters. The rules used to be they needed to be 0 degrees or colder for 3 nights in a row before the shelters would open up. I discovered this last year. It doesn't make sense to me. And so we before the bad weather, we said, listen, if the weather approaches anywhere near 0 degrees, open the shelters up. All the 33 boroughs, to give them credit, are all signed up to this. And we've also employed more outreach workers because some people are vulnerable. They may have mental health issues, they may have drug issues, alcohol issues. They may not like authority. They won't come in. We're going to have outreach workers to go out and speak to them and communicate with them. Some rough sleepers, because they've got a dog, wrongly think they won't be accepted into a shelter or a place of warmth. Last night, my Deputy Mayor for Housing, James Murray, and I visited a severe weather emergency provision shelter in Hammersmith. And it was both depressing and inspiring, the work taking place there. Inspiring because of these workers working through the night to help rough sleepers. Depressing because we know for every one person we're helping, there are 6, 7, 8 not being helped out on the streets in temperatures that are really, really cold. Let me show you some of the things we're doing. So we're making sure we identify people before they become rough sleepers. More outreach workers working tonight and over the course of the next few nights. We've given monies to allow the shelters to book B&Bs if need be. Some people won't want to go into a shelter, but they'll take a B&B. We're giving them flexibility to do so. The other thing I'm encouraging all of you to do, if you've got a phone, is there's an app called Street Link. Street Link. If you see somebody sleeping rough, just type in the app, please give us the location of this person. That app goes to an outreach worker who then goes to the person and makes sure they're okay and provides an offer of some shelter during the course of the night. And we're also got a page to donate to get more and more people helped this year. We all saw in the news a couple of weeks ago a rough sleeper lost his life in Westminster Tube in the 5th richest city in the world. And Ali, it's a big issue and big priority for us. And I'm inspired by the people I met last night, but it's a tragedy in our city. And so we've got to make sure we redouble our efforts in this area.
Okay, thank you very much. We now are out of time on safety. I repeat, any unanswered questions, speak to someone in the foyer after the meeting. The next topic is air quality and the environment. Questions over there? There's a man in the middle here waving a programme. That's it, question 4. We've got him.
Don't question that. Good evening. My name is Rupert Wiley. I live in Isleworth, close enough to the A4 and under the Heathrow approach. I gather, unless I'm mistaken, that the GLA's generally opposed to Heathrow expansion. I was hoping to ask this under the transport section, so you'll have to sort of mould this question. But would anybody like to comment, or Sadiq particularly, about how the mitigation might or might not work with regards to the extra, whether it be the 700 extra flights a day or the massive increase in surface access, which, as we know, the budget isn't there. There's potentially 10 billion shortfall. Maybe you'll comment on that, even though it's not strictly to do with the environment and air quality.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Lady in the brown cardigan.
This is, I'm Nicola Redpresser, and I'm from a group called Air Quality Brentford, a community group. We believe that stopping the ultra-low emission zone before the North Circular will confound the existing problem of poor air quality in our area. And with vehicles using the North Circular to avoid being charged. We believe that Brentford and actually the whole of Greater London should be included in the ultra-low emission zone, or Brentford needs to be made a clean air zone. It feels like we are being overlooked. Can you assure us that additional measures will be taken to clean up our seriously toxic air? Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
Over there is a lady, I think she's got glasses, and her hand is right up there. Yes, that's the one.
Hello both. I represent Heston Forum and Burnsway and Shelley Crescent Group. And my question is on pollution and the build-up of roads, particularly traffic concerning Henley's Roundabout. It's a very highly polluted area. And we'd like TfL and something done about it, please.
I can do all three of those questions in order, Tony. So Rupert, thank you for your question. It definitely is an air quality environment question. And when you look in this part of London, the main cause for the nitrogen dioxide and the nitrogen oxide to be so high is road transport and Heathrow Airport. They're the two biggest causes. And let me tell you a really scary stat, which is the particulate matters in London, across the whole of London, breaches the WHO guidelines. So no part of London has particulate matter that's within the limits of WHO guidelines. That's now, before Heathrow is expanded. And let me just be clear, Rupert, here. I'm not anti-Heathrow. What I'm anti is expansion of Heathrow. And it's very important that this is not perceived as being anti-Heathrow. Lots of people here work in Heathrow, and they do a great job. My concern is expansion. And if you think air quality is bad now, what's it going to be like in the future? What's it going to be like with more surface links going from other parts of London and the country to Heathrow? And if Heathrow break promises now, how do we have any guarantee that they're going to keep the promises they're making in relation to meeting the air quality needs? And what about noise? I mean, noise is also a real cause of quality of life issues for people in this part of London. In Wandsworth, where I live, it's an issue there. I know it's an issue here as well. Now, let me tell you my concern. This is where Heathrow have been very naughty and other government. All the improvements we're making because of City Hall, ultra-low emission zone, cleaning up our buses, more people walking and cycling, all these things are being bagged by Heathrow to say, oh, look, the air's getting better in London, which means we can have another runway in Heathrow, and that's not a problem. And they're sort of having their cake and eating it. And that's why it's really important that we put pressure on the government. Tony, I know, has been very, very vociferous and vocal about his views about expansion of Heathrow. A number of councils have a court case in the pipelines, I understand. And City Hall are against an expansion that leads to poor quality air and a poor quality of life for people here, but also affects other parts of London and the other parts of the country as well. And the second question, which is linked with this actually about air quality, is from Nicola. Can I just say, the pressure you're trying to put on me is the right sort of pressure. Because if we were speaking 2-3 years ago, people would be complaining about me bringing forward an ultra-low emission zone, about me trying to get rid of toxic air from some of our cars. So I like the sort of pressure you're bringing to bear upon me and to City Hall. Let me just remind colleagues what our plans are. We've already have the world's first toxicity charge applying in London. That's the C-charge area. So if you have a very polluting car, basically a car that's older than 2004, it's a polluting car, diesel, you have to pay an additional charge to come within the C-charge area. And we've noticed a huge reduction in the number of polluting cars coming into the C-charge area. The good news is these same cars probably drive around Brentford and Hounslow and Isleworth, and they're not being used anymore thanks to the T-charge. By the way, not all of us here were in favour of the T-charge. Some of people here were anti-good air, were anti-clean air. The good news is we defeated them. We're now planning to have an ultra-low emission zone, the world's first in 2019, covering the C-charge area. And what that will mean is, don't forget, the quality will no longer be what's called Euro 4, it will now be Euro 6. So we're raising the bar. So in 2019, if you want to come into central London, the C-charge area, you've got to have a really good car, a Euro 6 car. Roughly speaking, if it's diesel, 2015 or newer. If it's petrol, roughly speaking, 2008 onwards. Those cars, though, will also be driven in Brentford, in Hounslow, in Isleworth, and all the rest of it. So it will improve the quality of air in central London, but also improve the quality elsewhere. I'm not sure what some of these people think about that one, but we'll have to wait and see. In 2020, all of London will have the ULEZ for buses, coaches and lorries. The reason we've not done it overnight is because it's not fair for a fleet to have new hurdles placed upon them. And so we're giving them time to buy cleaner forms of buses, coaches and lorries. And that's 2020, all of London, including this part of London. We're consulting what happens in relation to cars, motorbikes and other vehicles. And the current consultation is from 2021 up to the North Circular and up to the South Circular. But if you've got different views, please let us have your views, and there's a genuine consultation. But don't worry that if it's just going to the North Circular or South Circular, you won't benefit. All the evidence is that actually it will lead to behaviour change, which means all of us benefit from cleaner vehicles being used across London. And that's in addition to the issues around encouraging more people to walk and cycle. We've stopped buying any more diesel buses now. They've got to be hybrid, hydrogen or electric, and we're making sure that we're using public transport in a sensible, environmentally friendly way. The question about the roundabout, I don't know the details, but if you come to the front at the end, in the front row here, my staff are here, and they'll take your details down, and we'll follow you up. We'll take your email, and we'll follow up the issue you're raising. Is that okay? Please, yeah. Well, don't give me the whole note tonight. Give us your email and phone number, and my cycling and walking commissioner will take your details, and I promise we'll chase you up. Is that okay?
Are there any questions near paddle number 5 over in that corner? We don't seem to have taken any. Is there anybody near number 5 or number 3? Look, no, you're nowhere near number 5 or number 3. I'm seeking to somebody near number 4. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor, for the much you're trying to handle the pollution in London. But this pollution normally comes, I have members of my family who have asthma, and normally it becomes severe because of so many roadworks which are not finished in time, which brings up, it builds up actually the traffic, causing a lot of pollution. And this road is not only one, so many roads linked to one another, and the work is not finished. The traffic build up, the pollution increase, and we have a problem with that. It seems as if the road works is not planned properly. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for questions really at the back of the hall where there hasn't been a lot of excitement or interest. Is that lady who's standing up asking a question right at the back? No, you're not. Well, it looks as though it's the chatty people down the front. No, there's a man with a beard near number 8.
Hi, I was listening to your sea charge, helping with keeping cars outside of London, but in particular, do you have any incentives for people who live in flats and want electric cars? Because I was looking to get one, but I didn't know how to charge it, and there's not enough charging platforms around, I would say, especially in Hounslow, but I've seen it a lot in London, central London. Cheers, thank you.
Okay. There is somebody at the back. Yes, number 4 is at the end of the corridor.
Hi. Well, I'm a new Londoner here. So, well, this city is really huge, and not just the matter of pollution, because it's the main thing. But I think that when I came here, I'm getting deaf, because the brakes of the buses are really, really noisy, and I can't help every day walking around the city. It's like it's extremely noisy. I'm getting deaf all the time, and please, if you can do something to avoid it, I'm really, really, I don't know how to say it, happy. Thank you very much.
Well, you've got a chance to make someone happy, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Firstly, the gentleman in this suit at the back, you're right. When it comes to roadworks, they're not properly coordinated. There are too many roads dug up. So one road could be dug up today by this company, British Gas, for argument's sake. That same road, 6 months later, dug up by Thames Water. A year later, dug up by BT. And the obvious question is, why can't they coordinate, do the works at one time, and all three at the same time use the opportunity to lay their pipes or put in the fibre optics and all the rest of it? We have powers in relation to fines and issue permits, but it's not enough of a deterrent. So we've lobbied the government to give us more powers in relation to this area. We do take action against those companies that take too long. They should be doing it much quicker. And we do take action and issue them fines. But now we're lobbying for more powers so we can have a real device to put pressure on these companies so they don't dig up our roads and cause all sorts of problems. Why can't, for example, if a road is being rerouted and work's not being done, that road be opened up? You plate the road so cars can go over it and stuff. So we're looking into this, because you're right. Road work causes congestion. Congestion causes bad quality air. So it helps the issue of air quality. So watch this space. We're going to try and rectify this issue, because it is a big, big issue. The second issue in relation to charging was a really, really important point, which is, look, it's possible to have a car and the car doesn't emit toxic stuff. Electric car is one way of doing so. Not everyone has a drive to charge their cars. And so what we're doing is helping councils have charging points. Hounslow has recently had 13 installed because of a partnership between us and Hounslow, using lampposts and using other forms of charging points. What we need, though, is rapid charging points across London, because what you can't do is leave your car plugged in overnight if you're in a flat. And so the good news is we've gone from almost 0 to now 75 rapid charging points across London. They take half an hour to charge, rather than 7, 8, 9 hours. Half an hour you can charge your car. And we need across London to have facilities for people with electric cars to charge their vehicles. We're working with the 33 boroughs, because they own the land often, using lampposts and other things to try and have charging points. Also thinking about we can have forecourts. Like we have petrol forecourts, why can't we have charging forecourts going forward in the future and stuff? Because that's the future. The future is making sure we make it attractive for someone like you to want to buy an electric car, because you can charge your vehicle even though you live in a flat. And so we're making progress in this area. At the moment, there are 3,000 charging points across London. We want there to be even more across London, including in outer London as well, because it can't just be in London where there are charging points. The third question in relation to the noise and your concerns about your hearing and stuff, it is an issue in London. It's an issue particularly in relation to noisy tubes, noisy trains, The underground can be really noisy. It's a concern for our staff who work in the underground in relation to noise as well. We are trying to do things to reduce noise. For example, on the trains, we're grinding the tracks and making sure there are better brakes to make less noise when it comes to the underground. In relation to traffic, you're right, there are simple things you can do to make braking less noisy. Nobody's actually complained to me in the past about our buses being too loud, but let me look into the issue of whether we can have an audit of our buses to see whether there is an issue, because I worry about our drivers, because our drivers are in the bus all day long. And if it is the case that they're too noisy, we can look into that. But I don't pretend I'm the world's expert on noise and our buses, but let me go away and look into that, and then Tony, report back to you, and you can then, via usual channels, report back to your constituents.
Okay, thank you very much. Out of time. As I say, any unanswered questions will be dealt with afterwards. The next section is housing. We're out of time. Housing questions. We've got a bit more interest in this one.
I mean, it took 2 hours to get here. Now I'm going to sit on the stage for 2 hours, and I'm going to take 2 hours to get here.
There's a man over there who's smiling very cheerily.
Hello, Mayor and the Assembly. Thank you for coming tonight. I'm Jay. I'm a young working Londoner. I live locally. I also work for a housing association locally called RHP. Personally and professionally, I know the housing issues facing young Londoners, and getting on the property ladder is a dream. At RHP, we've developed a product that addresses this issue. Firstly, please, Sadiq, come and see it in Teddington, in Richmond. B, in areas where shared ownership and even London living rent is unaffordable for young people, what is your solution for working young Londoners to find sustainable housing solutions?
And there's an even cheerier man sitting next to you. That man.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Assembly members. Mr. Khan, I've been reading the draft of your new London plan, which is currently in its consultation phase. I was extremely alarmed to read this requires 25,000 homes a year to be built on small sites. This would allow the building of blocks of flats on existing family homes and gardens. What will be the impact of this policy on suburbs such as Hounslow, and how many gardens will be lost as a result of this policy?
There's somebody near paddle number 5 at the back there. That's it.
Yeah, my question actually touches on homelessness as well as young people as well. My name is Adeleke Adeyemi, and I've worked within the homelessness sector as well as managed youth projects in the past. And Sean mentioned one thing there in terms of working with families to address young people issues. One of the things I wanted to raise here tonight was, there's a lot of money that's being pumped into the housing sector. The mayor mentioned that there's 50,000 homes that's being built every year. And actually, there's meant to be, as I believe, about up to 200,000 homes that need to be built every year in terms of the flux of people coming into the UK to live. So whilst we think of that, there are a lot of homeless people, who are losing out on supported housing, as well as, the numbers of homelessness will be rising as a result.
What's the question?
Well, the question is, what is the mayor going to do in terms of working with developers to actually identify within their schemes, within their development, allocation of supported housing or some sort of schemes that actually supports young people, supports families, and actually, bridges that gap of homelessness?
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for all those 3 questions. Jay, firstly, don't go away at the end. Make sure you speak to James Murray. James, do you want to stand up? So James is the Deputy Mayor for Housing, and we'll arrange for one of us to come to Teddington to come and see RHP. But just to remind you, in relation to young people and being able to afford to live in London, the previous definition of an affordable home was a home that's 80% of market rent. So it was linked to the market rent of a property rather than the earnings or income of a young person. I've thrown that definition in the bin. My definition of an affordable home is one of three things: either a home that's a council rent, and that's linked, as you know, to a manual worker's salary, or it's a home that's a London living rent that's a third of average local earnings. So the London living rent in Hounslow will be different to the London living rent in Camden. And the third definition is a shared ownership, part by part rent. And so we are trying to address this issue. We're also working with innovative developers. Pocket is one example, to see if we can make sure that we can do some work in relation to those affordable homes. Tom Copley, who's here, who's behind me, has done some work in relation to making sure corners aren't cut in relation to providing affordable homes, in relation to micro homes. And I'm sure Tom will want to come in relation to that shortly. In relation to the question asked by the gentleman next to you, and let me just answer you in a very straightforward way. The government says we need to build every year in London 72,000 homes. 72,000, government says. Each year, on average in London, we build not 72,000, 25,000. Now, if it is the case that we think we shouldn't be building on Greenbelt, and I think we shouldn't be building on Greenbelt, we've got to make sure we use brownfield sites, former factories, industrial sites in a more savvy way, but also make sure we have good quality, high density homes where there is space. Let me give you some examples of where small sites can be used for homes. Transport for London. We have surplus small sites next to stations, and we've identified between now and 2021 space for 10,000 new homes. What I'm not saying is that I will build a home in your back garden. I'm not saying how big it is, by the way. If it's big enough, we'll have a chat afterwards. I'm not joking. What I am saying is we've got to make sure we use small sites in a sensible manner. At the moment, by the way, you can build in your back garden. There's no need for planning permission. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, where there are small sites, there could be a small office building where the person is not used for office building anymore. Work with the council, work with us to turn that into high density, good quality homes for Londoners. And that, we're going to go from 25,000, approaching the government's target of 72,000. We think we've found enough land in London for about 65,000 homes. But if you think you've got a way of getting to 70,000 without building a green belt, speak to James Murray. We'll be happy to hear your ideas. The third question for the man at the back is so important, which is the fact that one size fits all won't work. We've got an older population. Because of the fantastic advances in science, people are living older. We want them living in their own homes rather than living elsewhere in residential care homes if possible. But also people need supported housing. And what the Draft London Plan does, sir, is make sure we encourage developers to not have a one-size-fits-all approach. We're talking to all sorts of developers. We're talking to developers in relation to housing associations, small one and big ones. We're speaking to private developers. We're speaking to the NHS. One of the real exciting things we've managed to negotiate from the government, and the government deserves credit for this, is devolution around surplus NHS land in London. Not simply to make sure we can afford to build homes for NHS workers, but think about how we can have homes for people who need supported housing. Think about how we can make it easy for people to live in their homes. And so that's what the Draft London Plan does going forward. And we are talking to developers all the time to make sure we meet the needs of London's housing.
Assembly Member Bailey.
The Mayor's analysis of our need for homes in London is accurate. We all know how expensive it is and how utterly impossible it is, particularly if you're young, to get on a housing ladder. But it has to be said that the Draft London Plan does make it easier to build on small sites. And it's been a worry for a number of people. I'm sitting here now looking at a letter that's been provided by a developer asking people if they want to sell, because he knows you can build on the footprint of their house, including their garden, and get on. And if you add to that as well that it looks like to me that the plan also makes it slightly harder to build on small industrial sites. Brownfield sites is the term we use. So it looks like it's taking away what we imagined we were going to build on and giving back something that we imagine we don't want to build on. I mean, maybe the Mayor sees it slightly differently, but the advent of these letters, and there's been a number of them around London, particularly in the suburbs, is now beginning to people are beginning to think it's a war on the suburbs. And why that's important that that feeling doesn't grow is because the suburbs will be providing a great deal of the housing, but if councils and local communities feel that they're being densities being foisted upon them, they'll start to deny, they'll start to push back and not accept these building projects, and then we won't have places to house our children. Because the important thing here is it looks like we could lose some of the family homes you already have and not replace them with family homes because the target for family homes has been removed, and that will make London a very, very bad place. If you have any idea that you want to raise a family in London, make raising a family in London virtually impossible.
Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you very much, Tony. I think one of the crucial things that the Mayor is doing that is going to help young Londoners is the London Living Rent policy. And this is a new tenure which is being based not on percentages of market rents like this 80% so-called affordable rent, but on based on people's earnings. And this is particularly going to benefit people like nurses and teachers and paramedics. What we've sort of used to term key workers, the people that London really needs to keep going and who wouldn't qualify for social housing but who can't afford to buy a house and possibly can't even afford shared ownership either, and really are being pushed out of this city. But ultimately, and this is the reason why we have this huge figure now of 66,000 homes a year that need to be built, by the way, 65% of which need to be genuinely affordable. The reason why that number is so high is because for 30 plus years, we've not been building the homes that we need, and we've not been building the affordable homes that we need. And that in a big part is because the state, the government, local government has been forced out, essentially, of the business of providing council housing. And the Mayor has secured £3.15 billion over 5 years for genuinely affordable housing in London, including some of these London Living Rent homes. But we actually need something like that figure every year from the government if we're going to get up to the level that we need. And that will benefit everyone, including young working Londoners. And I just want to say something finally, because it was raised earlier about rough sleeping and homelessness. And of course, rough sleeping is really the most visible and most tragic sign of homelessness. But there are hundreds of thousands of people in London who are in temporary accommodation or who are hidden homeless. And the Mayor has a number of policies in relation to rough sleeping. I think £30 million for rough sleeping services, £50 million for move-on accommodation, the No Night Sleeping Rough Task Force. But this is swimming against the tide, and we need action from national government. It is national government policies that have increased homelessness, even according to the National Audit Office, that don't usually get very political about these things. They have said this. The biggest cause of homelessness is now the end of a private tenancy. So we urgently need, and this is stuff that goes beyond, unfortunately, the Mayor's ability, the Mayor's powers. We need the government to change its policy on welfare and on cuts and on caps, and to introduce more security for people living in the private rented sector.
Near number 5, we have 2 people waving their programmes. Are you together? Just one of you.
Hello, I'm Richard Griffiths, the chairman of Hamworth Park House. I'm also a resident of Hamworth Park. Hamworth Park House is a Grade 2 listed historic house, and it's on Historic England's Register of National Importance. It falls within Hamworth and the Feltham area. It's the home of London's first air park. The community are campaigning to save it and to restore 2 levels to include a museum, a cafe, an education centre, youth clubs, wedding venues, arts and crafts, and much more. New housing is planned to enable the funds to save Hamworth Park House for generations to come. Will you support the community in this? And lastly, would you like to visit Hamworth Park House to meet the friends of Hamworth Park House and to see what the special community benefits are? Also, lastly, I'd just like to say thank you to our wonderful MP, Seema, who has been to the house twice and has helped us with the open days. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have young people there. The young man who's standing up, sort of. Thank you. That's the one.
Hello, my name is Yusuf Chand and I'm a resident of Hounslow. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask how my generation are going to afford houses in London with the surge in house prices in the recent years. This is unaffordable for the average person living and working in London. Us Londoners are being driven out of the city, and I don't want to live somewhere 5 miles away from London. So I want to know what you're going to do about it to help us stay in London.
Woman with the scar.
Hi,
I'm refugee woman in Hounslow Citizen. I would like to ask a question. Do you know how many people are from refugee and migrant communities are homeless? What are being done support for them? How are specific needs that arise from trauma taken into account? How are you supporting elderly refugees and migrants? Thank you. Sometimes my pronunciation I didn't understand. I don't know.
It's a question on how are you supporting refugees and migrants for housing.
Thank you. Can I firstly deal with the question from Richard? Can I say, Richard, I completely agree with you. Seema is wonderful. She's a great MP. So, look, so I want to ask my other deputy mayor, Jules Pipe, to stand up. Jules, you want to stand up? So Jules, can you come and speak to Jules afterwards? We'll arrange for someone to come down and see the fantastic work taking place, and heritage is very important to our London plan. And so speak to Jules afterwards, and we'll liaise with Seema about the work taking place at Hamworth. Yusuf, let me tell you something that I'm well aware of as the father of two wonderful teenage daughters, which is the evidence is by 2030, 1 out of 3 30-year-olds, 1 out of 3 will be living with their mum and dad because they can't afford to move out of home. Now, I love my daughters, but at some stage they've got to leave. So this is an issue that's really personal to me in relation to making sure we have genuinely affordable homes for young Londoners to be able to afford to live in. And Tom, in his answer, actually summarised some of the challenges we have, which is, look, we need to make sure we're building far more genuinely affordable homes that our young people need. Our population is 8.8 million. By 2020, 9 million. By 2030, 10 million. Growth per se is not a problem, but lack of planning for the growth is a problem. And so for those people that say, don't build on brownfield sites, for those people that say we shouldn't be using the small sites to build homes on, I say, where are you going to build these homes? Where are you going to build genuinely affordable homes for our young people? And so that's why I've redefined the definition of an affordable home. I'm not going to be somebody who says 80% of market value is affordable, but I'm going to take on those people who say we shouldn't be building on small sites, we shouldn't be building on brownfield sites, we shouldn't be having a conversation about how people get to work, get to college, and they walk more and they cycle more. But it is a challenge. What I don't want, though, Yusuf, is people like you leaving this great city. This city gave many of us here on stage the chance to fulfill our potential. It gave us the helping hand. It is the greatest city in the world. We don't want to lose talent like you to other cities around the country or around the world. It's in our interests to make sure there isn't a brain drain and we keep the brains in London. The question about the refugees is a really important question. So just to give you an idea of the challenge we have, I talked to when Ali asked the question about the rough sleepers. James and I were at a rough sleepers shelter last night, and there's a phrase they used which is relevant. It is no recourse to public funds. And one of the challenges even good councils like Hounslow have, and many other good councils across London have, is often they're presented with somebody who's a rough sleeper, who's homeless, and because of their uncertain immigration status, they haven't got recourse to public funds, and there's not a lot the council can do. Councils have faced 40% worth of cuts over the last 7-8 years. They are struggling to provide the basic services, let alone the services for those who have no recourse to public funds. It is a challenge. In City Hall, we're supporting charities as much as we can. We're doing work around refugees, particularly for those women who are the victims of domestic violence and issues around London who need housing. We've got a strategy coming out very soon that will help women and girls in London. And we're supporting where we can, in a small way, those organisations that help refugees across our city. But I'm not going to pretend, I'm afraid, that we've got the resources to provide the assistance that refugees need. And I just end by saying this point. One of the reasons why we are the greatest city in the world is we provide a refuge for those fleeing persecution and seeking asylum. And we should be really proud of our history as a place that provides asylum and safe refuge for these people. And it is an outrage, the fact that we have in 2018 children who aren't being given a refuge in London, promised safe refuge. These are Syrian children in 2018 still not being given that refuge. And I think you should be proud of the Assembly members here who are united in our call on the government saying it's a disgrace. There should be much more to help these vulnerable children.
And we now come to the final section, which is on growing London's economy. Questions, please? Woman at the back with glasses, close to number 7, closer to number 8.
Hello there. My name's Sam Smith. Since
Beg your pardon.
Since 2013, central government has progressively introduced legislation to allow the conversion of offices, industrial and shops to flats without formal planning permission or contribution to local infrastructure. Are you concerned about the impact that this is having on London's economy and jobs, and what are you doing to combat this?
Question from a lady down here.
Hi, my name is Unsa Chowdhury and I'm from Isleworth. So my question kind of focuses on transport, economy, but also housing in a way.
Well, let's stick with the economy, please.
So we've got the Golden Mile in Brentford and Austin Spring Grove. There is a old TfL line there, so the old Southall to Brentford. Would you consider reopening it and helping us to bring some economy to this part of West London?
Okay. So someone near panel number 1. Well, hand waving in the air. A lady waving her hand.
As a young feminist and a fellow Khan, I've seen you post a lot about women's rights on social media. You support the Behind Every Great City and Our Time Now campaigns. However, I want to question what you're actually doing to change the current inequalities faced by working women in London's economy today.
I'm glad you mentioned the word economy. Okay. Yes.
So the first question about permitted development is a really important question. The idea was probably a good one, which is to make it easier for office blocks to be turned to residential, bearing in mind we have a housing crisis. What it's led to is poor quality housing in parts of London, nowhere near enough affordable housing, and landowners making massive profits. At the same time, we've lost precious and valuable workspace. And so what we're trying to do is to help councils protect these areas in London by helping them have what's called Article 4 directions to protect these offices being turned into poor quality housing. What we'd rather do is work with landowners, work with councils. You can have mixed office and residential developments. The Draft London Plan talks about this, particularly in town centres. It's possible to have, for example, ground floor shops and offices, but you can have going upwards residential developments. And so I think permitted development hasn't been good for London, and we're looking to put pressure on the government to make it work far better for our city. Because my concern is this: once something's been lost to a PD, to residential, it's an opportunity lost forever. And that's why it's really important to get involved early with these sites to make sure we get good quality housing that we desperately need, and it's got to be good quality, affordable housing for our city. Unza, thank you for your question and for having the foresight to think about the link between infrastructure and transport and the economy. Because actually, having good infrastructure and good transport leads to good economy. So we're doing some work in relation to the West London Orbital and doing some work around this line and bringing back into use some of this direct line. Why don't I suggest, Tony, that I'll let Seema, the MP, have details about this, and you can contact Seema or my office, and we'll let you know some of the progress in this. It's quite exciting in relation to bringing back in use current lines not used well to try and regenerate the area, particularly if we can connect town centres in West London and elsewhere as well. And just think about if we've got Crossrail 1, which opens towards the end of this year, next year. Hopefully we'll have Crossrail 2 as well, but also we can connect town centres with some of these direct lines being reused as well. Add to the equation, over the course of the next 3-4 years, we'll have even better bus services in outer London as we reduce in-London services because of Elizabeth Line. I think it's quite exciting for the economy in the west of London. And I'm not sure if the last questioner was saying that we're both Khans and we're both young as well. I'm hoping she was saying we're both young and we're both Khans and we're both feminists. The first thing you could do is this Sunday in Trafalgar Square, we're going to have a really amazing event. Helen Pankhurst, who's the granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst, we're going to re-walk the walk from Parliament Square to Trafalgar Square, and then in that great square, there'll be a number of great speakers talking about why it's important to address the issue of gender inequality and to have gender equality. And if you remember from your history books, the suffragette movement and the suffragist movements, Trafalgar Square was really important in relation to lobbying politicians to change the law and to finally, as Jeanette said, give some women the right to vote 100 years ago and then more women 10 years later. A number of things we're doing in City Hall. We published last year the first ever gender pay audit. Never before had City Hall done this. Why is it important? Because I want you to know the salaries of men and women and to realise there's a pay gap. Then what we've done is we've now got an action plan to reduce that pay gap. Why is it that there is a gender pay gap? The answer basically is in the senior positions, there are more blokes than women. Well, we've got to address that. It's not the case, by the way, that there aren't enough talented women. Don't for 1 second assume that's the case. What I say to people when they say there aren't enough talented women is you aren't looking hard enough and you mix with the wrong people. And we should be really proud that for the first time ever, the most senior police officer in the country, the commissioner of the Met Police, she's a woman. We should be really proud for the first time ever, the most senior firefighter, the commissioner for the London Fire Brigade, she's a woman. And there are other steps we're taking across our city as well. We want to make sure, for example, every young person realises, particularly if they're a girl, there is no career out of their reach. Yesterday, I announced a £7 million worth of sum for a digital tech pipeline, particularly targeted towards girls, young women, and ethnic minority communities, those in deprived communities as well. And what Behind Every Great City is about is not simply commemorating the progress made over the last 100 years, but also redoubling our efforts to have gender equality. Because it's still the case in London in 2018, if you're born a girl, your life chances are less than if you're born a boy. And we are the most progressive city in the world. That can't be right.
Paddle number 8. I think it's really very hard to see, but I think you've got someone there. Oh, I can't see it.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Najib Ahmed. I'm a prevent coordinator essentially for Hounslow, but it's more a question on business. What is the Mayor's Office prepared to do to grow London's economy in the light of the increasingly and greatly escalating business rates that are going to be applied to businesses across London, and the stifling impact that that's going to have on the businesses that we all want to run?
Is there another person near number 8? It's completely invisible to me, I'm afraid.
No.
Right, near number 7. Well, it looks like the lady there. I'll come to you. I'm on my way.
Good afternoon. My question is obviously that Mr. Mayor has touched on the digital technology slightly, sort of. It's going to become the key issue and the key, sort of, you can say, for the next generation. How are we going to bring that into the next generation, that people actually are more into the artificial intelligence, they are aware of it, they are educated on it? What are the plans and the policies around that from our government? Thank you.
Right, who yelled out over there? That woman, I'm told, that woman with the... Yes, it looks like the lady nearest the paddle, number 1.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Give me a fiver now.
I'm with the Hounslow West team, and this is a question just not also about economy, but the services and facilities for our residents here in Hounslow. Mr. Mayor, I'm a resident in Hounslow West area, and along with thousands of other residents in the local community, we are greatly concerned about current proposals put forward by A2 Dominion for the former Morrison site. We urgently want to see a larger supermarket on the site, which we understand would be commercially viable, and for more car parking for residents and customers. Our local councillors strongly support us. Our local MP, Seema Malhotra, has also written about this to your Deputy Mayor for Housing. We do not feel our issues have been listened to, and the lack of a large supermarket in walking distance has made life much harder for local people. Will you comment to look at our concerns as part of the Stage 2 referral?
Mr. Mayor.
So let me do all those questions. I mean, firstly, the question about small businesses in particular and business rates. There has been a massive hike, last year, and the transitional relief didn't really help small businesses. By the way, Heathrow got a business rates reduction, with fascinating anomaly in relation to what happens with the current regime. We're doing a number of things to help small businesses in this area. So we've set aside a sum of money to help businesses in relation to workspace, in relation to transport, in relation to infrastructure. It's £140 million we've set aside to help businesses grow in London, particularly because we're concerned about the consequences of Brexit, if it's an extreme hard Brexit. Separately, we're also helping businesses who want to grow, particularly small businesses. We've got a good growth hub. And so if you want to contact City Hall, we've got a team there, and Jules Pipe is the mayor in charge of this, deputy mayor in charge of this, which is a team set up with the London Enterprise Panel, the LEAP, helping small businesses grow and flourish and thrive and do better. Some of it is doing deals in Europe. Some of it is supporting you with expansion. Some of it is helping you with scale up and stuff. So do contact City Hall about what we can do to help your business scale up as well. The bad news, there'll be another business rates valuation in the next 2-3 years' time. And so I'm afraid this is not the end of the business rates pain. And what we need is more certainty for small businesses going forward. The second question is such a fascinating question, which is how do we realise that technology is an opportunity, not something to be scared of, with AI, with automation, with robotics. And I genuinely believe that actually our future as a city and as a country is in high-skilled, well-paid jobs, not low-skilled, badly paid jobs. And technology is one way to do so. But that means skilling up our youngsters to have the skills for these jobs of tomorrow. We've got to invest in young people, whether it comes to coding or programming or to be tech savvy. That's why I announced this sum of money yesterday of £7 million. And particularly we've got to reach those groups who currently aren't using tech. Why is it? When you go to great tech companies, there are far more men than there are women. Why do so few girls do coding? And so we're working with big companies from Google to Apple to small and medium-sized companies to make sure we train up our youngsters to have the skills for the jobs of tomorrow. But also, we aren't too old to retrain. You can teach an old dog new tricks. I speak as one. And so we've got to make sure we have an ethos of continuing professional development. All of us should realise the job for life is gone. The idea where you'd get a job at 21 and have that job until you're 70, that's gone now. You'll retrain throughout the course of your life. Sometimes it's saying to an employer, you have a duty of care on your employees to train them up. But also it means us at City Hall. And from 2019, we'll be taking over further education. And we're doing some work around how we can think about training up Londoners going forward. A career service that's for everyone. Those sorts of things are really, really important. We've really got to think about this as an opportunity, not something to be scared of. And the question from Hounslow West, you're right to remind me that this decision will come to me as a planning decision. And that means I sort of sit like a judge. What I can't do is give you my views before I've considered the case. That's called prejudging the outcome when there's a quasi-judicial function. All I would say, though, is that it's really important that if there's any retailer that wants to have a new retail development on the former Morrison's site, they come forward. The council will decide the application based upon its merits, but to be fair to the council's job isn't to be a retail provider. What they do is that they decide whether something gets permission or not, and they can try and encourage retailers to come to the area and try to have a mixed development with housing and retail. But we need, it could be Morrison's, it could be somebody else to come forward with a plan, and then for the council to consider the merits of that plan, and I'll consider it as the mayor on quasi-judicial terms whether it deserves to get permission or not going forward.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Well, we've now come to the end of the evening. As I say, for any questions unanswered, there will be an opportunity to give your questions to staff in the foyer. May I thank you all for coming and for being such a tolerant audience, and may I wish you a very safe journey home. Thank you very much.